The Second Phone, a thriller, narrated by Jessica Ann Bogart, written, produced, and directed by Barron Darby. Part 1, The Last Good Day, Chapter 1. The second phone was still warm. I need you to hold that with me for one moment before I tell you anything else, because it is the door everything else walks through, a cheap black phone taped to the underside of my husband's workbench in the one corner of the garage I was never supposed to look, and when I peeled it loose in the dark, it was warm in my hand, blood warm, held warm. He had been down here minutes ago while I set the table upstairs and called down that dinner was ready, and he had answered me in that easy voice, "Be right up, babe," and slid this warm phone back into its hiding place and come up and kissed my temple and told me the chicken smelled incredible. There was a photograph of me on the screen, taken through my own kitchen window from the dark of my own backyard. And there was a folder with another woman in it. And there were 40 minutes on the clock before he came home with our daughter. That is where this ends up. A woman on a cold garage floor with a warm phone in her hands, and 40 minutes to decide whether she and her little girl live. I promise I will take you all the way into that garage, into every second of those 40 minutes, and past them, into the dark where it goes. But not yet. Because if I start there, you will do what everyone does. You will ask how I didn't know. 7 years, a whole marriage, and you found out in a garage. And I will never be able to make you understand the answer, which is that you cannot see a house from inside a house, unless first I take you back and let you live in the house with me. Let you love it the way I loved it. So I have to take you back 6 months to the last good day, to the last day I stood in my own life and felt nothing but lucky, because you cannot understand the phone until you have stood in the warmth it ended. Come back with me to June. Come stand in the light. I know what's coming. Let me have the light a little longer anyway. Chapter 2. It was a Saturday, and it was handed to me whole and perfect, the way the best days are, when you are too far inside them to know you are being given a thing you will spend the rest of your life trying to hold. David woke me with coffee. That was his Saturday ritual. The good mug, 2 sugars, brought to my side of the bed before I was all the way up out of sleep. And I remember the weight of the mattress shifting as he sat, and the smell of the coffee, and behind it the smell of him, cut wood and cold morning. Then Chloe came in and did the thing she was getting almost too big to do, launched herself into the middle of the bed, all elbows and cold feet, and the 3 of us lay in a heap in the June light, making a plan that changed twice before we were even downstairs. The lake, we decided. We would spend the whole day at the lake. We made pancakes. David did the thing that made Chloe scream, flipping them too high, catching one behind his back, missing one so it stuck to the ceiling for a full second before it came down, and I stood at the stove pretending to be the grown-up in the room and laughing so hard I had to hold the counter. I want you to see him the way I saw him that morning, because it matters. He was not a monster in that kitchen. He was a good-looking, tired man in a gray t-shirt making his daughter laugh, and he glanced up at me over her head with a look I read that morning as pure contentment, as a man counting his blessings, and I smiled back and mouthed something silly, and the whole day was in front of us like an open field. We drove out with the windows down and Chloe's terrible pop music turned up, and David knew every word on purpose to make her die of embarrassment and delight in the back seat. We swam. He threw her off his shoulders into the cold, clean water again and again. Higher, Daddy, higher. And I floated on my back and looked up at a sky with 3 clouds in it, and felt my whole chest go loose and warm, and thought, with no irony at all, I am happy. I am so lucky. This is the life. And I was not wrong that I was happy. That is the part I need you to hold on to through everything that comes after. The happiness was real. It was the realest thing I have ever felt. It just turned out I was the only one of the two of us who was actually in it. We ate sandwiches with sand in them. Chloe fell asleep on the drive home with her hair still wet and salt drying on her cheeks, and David reached across the console and took my hand and didn't say anything, and the radio was low, and the sun came down gold through the trees, and I remember thinking, clear as a bell, there is nothing I would change. Nothing. Not one single thing. I have gone back to that thought 10,000 times since. There is nothing I would change. I said it to myself in a warm car, holding the hand of the man who had, by then, already been photographing me through our windows in the dark for 5 months. He had a folder of me on a phone taped under his bench while I floated on my back and thanked God for my life. Both of those things were true at the same time, in the same marriage, in the same gold afternoon, and learning to hold them both without going insane has been the work of my life ever since. Chapter 3. That night, after Chloe was down, we danced in the kitchen. There was no reason for it. A song came on the little speaker while we were doing the last of the dishes, and David took the dish towel out of my hands and hung it on the oven door and pulled me in. And we danced slow in our socks on the kitchen floor. I put my head on his chest and felt his heartbeat through his shirt. Steady, steady, the steadiest man I knew. And I thought, this is the thing I fought my whole childhood to get to. A warm kitchen, and a good man, and a sleeping child, and a slow dance for no reason on an ordinary Saturday. I made it all the way here, and behind him over his shoulder was the window over the sink. I want to tell you about the window, because it is where the first crack was, and I stepped right over it, the way you step over a crack in a sidewalk you have walked 1,000 times. It was full dark by then, and the kitchen light was on, and the window was a black mirror with the two of us in it, dancing, and past our reflection was the yard, invisible, and I felt it. I felt the thing I would spend the next 5 months teaching myself not to feel. A coolness on the back of my neck, a sense of the black glass as a place I should not stand too long in front of, an old animal reluctance with no words attached to it. And I did what I always did. I turned us gently so my back was to the window, and I put my face back against David's chest, and I told the animal to hush, because what kind of woman gets a chill in her own happy kitchen on the best day of her life and lets it ruin the dance? There were other cracks. I can see them all now, lit up like a runway. The one corner of the garage behind his workbench that he had asked me, lightly, years ago, to just leave as his one square foot of the world, and I had thought it was sweet, a man wanting one small thing that was only his. The way he always seemed to know when I'd had a hard day before I said a word, which I had told my sister was the most romantic thing in the world. The rule, his rule, gentle and total, from the very beginning of us. No secrets, ever. Couples who keep secrets are couples already dying, he told me once, early, with wet eyes, and I had taken his hand and promised. And I had lived inside that promise for 7 years, like it was a warm house, and never once understood that it was a locked one, and that the lock only worked one way. That night, I understood none of it. That night there was only the dance and his heartbeat and the black window I had turned my back on, and I went up the stairs happy. I need you to remember that I went up the stairs happy, because I need you to feel what it cost later to come back down them. Chapter 4. I want to show you one ordinary evening from that autumn, because it is the kind of thing you cannot see while you are inside it, and I need you to see it now, from where we both are, so that later you do not ask me how I missed it. We had people over in September, the Hendricksons from 2 doors down, another couple from David's work, a normal Saturday, wine and a roast and the good napkins. And David was wonderful. He was always wonderful at a table. That was the whole engine of him. He refilled glasses before they were empty. He drew the quiet wife from his office, out of her shell, with exactly the right question. He told the story about Chloe and the ceiling pancake, and had the whole table laughing. And at some point I started telling a story of my own. Some small thing. A mix-up at the pharmacy. Nothing. And I felt his hand come to rest on the back of my chair. Light. Warm. And his thumb moved once, slowly, against my shoulder blade. An affectionate touch. Everyone saw a husband touching his wife. And I stopped talking. I did not decide to stop. I just found, a sentence later, that I had handed the story to him, and he finished it better than I would have, and the table laughed, and his hand stayed warm on my chair. I could not have told you that night that anything had happened. If you had stopped me clearing the plates and asked, I would have said I was the luckiest woman on the street. But something in me had learned the weight of that thumb, the way you learn a language before you know it is a language. And something in me had gone quiet under it and let him carry the room, because carrying the room was his. And my job, the job I had trained for since I was 8 years old at the top of a staircase, was to keep my surface smooth and not take up more air than the man of the house wanted me to take. Later, everyone gone, I was drawing the last glass, and I said, lightly, that I'd wanted to finish the pharmacy story, and he came up behind me and kissed the back of my head and said, "You did finish it, babe. You always trail off. It's cute. I just help you land it." And I laughed, because it was gentle, because it was true I did trail off, and I did not hear the thing under it, which was a man telling his wife, kindly, that her stories were his to land. That is what the control looked like. Not a raised voice, not a slammed door, a warm hand on a chair, a thumb on a shoulder blade, and a woman who had been raised to go quiet under exactly that pressure, calling it love for 7 years in a warm, bright house with the good napkins out. Chapter 5. To understand why I did not look, why I could stand in a kitchen and feel the hand on the base of my skull and turn away from it and call that love, you have to know about my father. His name was Ray, and everybody loved him. That is where it starts, and it is the whole key, and I did not turn it in my own lock for almost 40 years. Everybody loved Ray. He was the funniest man at any table, the one who picked up the check, the one whose laugh you could hear across a parking lot. And there were 2 of him, and my little sister Rachel and I learned before we had words for it to tell which one was coming home by the sound of the car door. A goodnight Ray shut it soft, the latch, and then an easy push, a man in no hurry. A bad night Ray shut it once, hard, a flat bang that went through the whole house like a dropped board. And by the time that sound reached the top of the stairs where we were folded together, listening, I was already moving Rachel toward the closet, into the game, the quiet game, where I made my little sister smaller and smaller and more silent, until the storm moved over the house and past it. I was 8 the first time I got us out the back door in our nightgowns, out into the dark of the yard, into the tree line behind the fence, because the trees behind the fence was the safe place. The dark behind the fence was where you went when the lit house was the dangerous one. We would stand out there in the cold and watch the warm windows of our own home and wait for the lights to go out, which meant he had gone to sleep, which meant it was over, which meant we could go back in and be a normal family in the morning and never, ever speak of it. Don't poke the bear. That was my mother's whole religion. Keep your face nice. Don't give him a reason. And what a girl learns, breathing that air, is that her safety is a performance, that you survive a dangerous man not by fighting and not by fleeing, but by keeping the surface so smooth, so pleasant, so unprovoking, that the danger slides off you and finds someone else. I became a genius at it. I kept my expression smooth through my entire childhood, and I told myself when I grew up and met a man who never raised his voice and never slammed a door, that I had chosen the opposite of my father. I had broken the pattern. I had gotten out. I had not chosen the opposite. I had chosen a man who felt, in my body, in the old wordless place, exactly like home. A man everyone loved. A man whose moods I could read before he showed them. A man who made me feel my whole job was to keep my composure and not look too hard at the thing in the room. I married the feeling of my childhood and called it peace. And every time the creature on the nape of my neck pulled at my sleeve in that warm kitchen, the 8-year-old at the head of the stairs put her hand over its mouth because she had learned a long time ago that looking too hard at the man of the house was the one thing that could get you killed. So, no, I did not look. For 5 more months, through a whole ordinary autumn, I did not look. And I need you to understand it was not stupidity and it was not weakness. It was training. It was the most practiced skill I owned. It had kept me alive once. It nearly got me killed. Now. Chapter 6. I have gone back over the beginning of us 1,000 times since, the way you run your tongue over a broken tooth, because it is the piece that explains how a woman who is not a fool spends 7 years inside a lie and calls it the best thing that ever happened to her. He did not sweep me off my feet. That is the first thing people get wrong, because the movies taught us to fear the whirlwind, the man who moves too fast. And David never moved too fast. David moved exactly as fast as I wanted, and not 1 inch faster, which I know now is not romance. It is calibration. We met at the counter of a coffee place near the hospital where I did intake, and he did not hit on me. He asked a question about the book I was reading, and then he listened to the answer. Actually listened, the way almost no one listens, and I found out much later, in a room with Ruiz, that listening like that is not a gift. It is a tool. A man who watches windows for a living is first and always a man who gathers, and for the price of a few good questions, he walked away that first afternoon with a working map of everything I was lonely for. And then he built it. Over months, patiently, unhurried, he became the exact shape of the thing I was lonely for. And the terrible genius of it, the part I cannot make people understand, is that he was never anyone at all, so he could be anyone I needed. I wanted steady, so he was steady. I wanted a man who noticed, so he noticed everything. The new haircut, the bad day I hadn't mentioned, the way I took my coffee after the 3rd date without being told. I called it being seen. I told Rachel, glowing, he just gets me. And Rachel, who is also not a fool, said he sounds wonderful. and I did not hear the small held breath under it, because I did not want to. The night he told me about Karen, we had been together 4 months, and he did it beautifully. He waited until I had said, "I love you" first, so the confession would land on ground I had already committed to, and then one night on my couch he got quiet and said there was something he needed me to know. He went to his jacket and took out a photograph he just happened to have, a single photograph of a dark-haired woman, and told me the Arizona story in that gentle voice, how she'd left while he traveled, packed a bag, cut off contact, broke him, taught him not to trust. And I did the thing he had built me over 4 months to do. I moved toward the wound. I took his hand and said I would never do that to him. I would never leave like that. We would never keep secrets. And he looked at me with wet eyes and said that was all he wanted. No secrets, ever. And I thought I was watching a broken man decide to trust again. I was watching a man show me the exit and lock it. I was watching him hand me the rule that would keep me from ever doing what Karen had actually done, which was see him and run. No secrets. His rule. The rule that sent me down to a garage 7 years later with a clear conscience and no defenses, because we didn't keep secrets, because he had taught me that a wife who wonders what's under the bench is a wife already dying. He built me a marriage with no locks on the inside and told me the open doors were love. And the photograph he showed me that night was not a wound he was sharing. It was a brochure. It was the woman in the folder named Kay. And he was showing her to me the way a man shows you the last car he sold. And I said yes. And I married the salesman. And I moved into the lot. Chapter 7. The storm came in October, on a Thursday, green-black and slow off the flat land west of us, the kind of sky our part of the country specializes in, and it is the reason I ever found anything at all. By then, the autumn had done its quiet work on me. There had been more cracks, and I had stepped over all of them. A night I woke at 3, and he was not in the bed, and I found him in the dark of the garage, and he came up easy and said he couldn't sleep, and I believed him, because why wouldn't I? A morning I found the good flashlight moved from the pegboard to a drawer, and thought nothing, because he was always organizing my things and calling it caring. A Sunday I stood at the sink too long and felt the yard behind me like a held breath, and stepped back from the glass without deciding to, and laughed at myself, out loud, alone, in my own kitchen. That wordless thing knew. I want that on the record. For 5 months the animal had been pulling at my sleeve, harder and harder, and I had been teaching myself a little more each week, not to feel its teeth. That is the truth nobody likes, the one that does not let me off the hook and does not let anyone else off either. Somewhere under the not knowing, I knew. I had a body that kept trying to tell me, in the only language it had, and I had spent an entire autumn learning not to listen, because listening would have meant blowing up a life that, from the outside, through the window, looked like everything a woman is supposed to want. Then the power flickered. It was dinner time, the storm leaning on the house, the microwave clock blinking its stupid 12, and I wanted the good flashlight, the heavy aluminum one, before the lights went for real, because I did not want to be feeling along the walls in the dark with a 9-year-old asking me questions. David had left 20 minutes before to get Chloe from swim across town. I had the house to myself. I went down the 3 wooden steps into the garage, and the flashlight was not on the pegboard, and I crouched to look on the shelf under the workbench, and my hand went out ahead of my eyes the way your hand does in a familiar dark. And where there should have been raw wood, there was tape. I did not think anything yet. That is the part I need you to believe, after everything I have just told you about the old instinct and the cracks, that in the actual moment my hand found it. I thought splinter, I thought he taped a cord up out of the way. I thought nothing. My fingers followed the tape to the shape under it, flat, the size of a deck of cards, the size of a phone, and my body knew before my mind did that whole cold drop through the center of you, the stare that is not there. I peeled it loose. A cheap black phone, cared for, no cassettes, no cracks. I pressed the button, and the screen lit blue under the bench and asked me for 6 digits. And I knelt on the cold concrete of my own garage and did not want to know what I already knew, which was that I could open it, because I could open anything of David's, because we did not keep secrets. That was the whole brochure of our marriage. I typed our daughter's birthday, 0411, and the phone opened for me like it had been waiting, and it was warm. That is where I started, 6 months and a whole happy life ago. It was warm in my hand, and 8 feet above my head through the floorboards, I could hear the ordinary sounds of the house I had loved, and I understood, kneeling there, that I had just stepped over the last crack, and that there was no more stepping over, and that the good day at the lake was already gone, already 6 months gone, already a country I could never get back to. I had time. That was the one mercy, and it was a thin one. David was 15 minutes across town, and swim ran until 7, and it was 6:40 by the dusty clock he'd hung on the wall himself. 40 minutes, maybe less. I knelt on the cold floor with the warm phone in my 2 hands and swiped my thumb across the glass to wake it all the way, and I still did not understand what I was looking at, not for a full second, the way you don't understand your own face in a photograph someone took without telling you. Because the first thing on the screen, the very first thing, was a picture of me. Part 2, The 40 Minutes, Chapter 8. A woman at a kitchen sink, evening light, a dish towel over her shoulder, looking down at something out of frame. It took me a full second to place the kitchen as mine. It took me another to understand that the photograph had been taken from outside, through the window, from the dark of my own backyard, looking in, at me, while I washed a pan and thought I was alone in the safest place I had ever lived. I did not scream or drop the phone or run. I got very still, the way an animal gets still when the shape at the edge of the field has not yet decided what it is. And I swiped, because I had to know if it was one photograph or if it was more. It was more. It was dozens. It was months. Me at the sink, me in the yard cutting back the hydrangeas in my Saturday clothes, me on the back step with my first coffee, not yet awake, me through the bedroom curtains as a silhouette, undressing, and whoever took that one had steadied the camera and waited for the towel to drop, because it was in focus, and focus in the dark takes patience, takes a person who has decided to be there. And they were dated, a little cluster of white numbers stamped in the corner of every frame, and I scrolled backward through the dates the way you climb down a ladder in the dark, one careful rung at a time, and they went back, not weeks. There was a picture of me in a winter coat I'd given to Goodwill in the spring, taken through the frost on the kitchen glass, and I sat down hard on the cold concrete of my own garage. Here is the splinter my mind kept snagging on, and I have to make you snag on it with me, because it is the whole shape of the thing. If a stranger was watching me through my windows, that is a nightmare. But it is a nightmare with edges, a nightmare you call the police about. This was not a stranger's phone. It was taped under David's bench. It opened to our daughter's birthday. The man who had stood in my backyard in the dark all winter, waiting for a towel to drop, was the man who slept 8 inches from me every night and gave me the warm side of the bed and brought me coffee on Sundays and had, that very evening, kissed my temple and gone up to wait for a flashlight. So which was he? That was the question I could not hold in my head without my hands shaking. Was I looking at a sickness he had hidden from me? Or was I looking at a plan he was building for me? Because those are two different marriages, and only one of them lets you live. Chapter 9. And then the strangest thing happened. The thing the very kind therapist keeps wanting me to have not done, because falling apart is a story people know how to comfort. I did not fall apart. Something stood up inside me while my body stayed sitting. Some cold, clean, competent thing. A stranger who had apparently been living in me my whole life, waiting for exactly this. And she spoke to me in my own kitchen voice, flat and level. You will not get this hour twice. Learn everything. Take everything you can carry out in a form he cannot reach. Put the rest back exactly. And do not let one flicker of this reach your face across the dinner table. Because if he took these, he is capable of things you have not let yourself imagine, and the only advantage you have in the world is that he does not know you know. I have told you already where that cold, competent woman came from. She was not new, and she was not brave in the way people mean when they say brave. She was 8 years old. She had gotten a little girl out a back door and into the safe dark more times than either of us could count, keeping her face nice the entire way. And she had been waiting in me my whole life for the night. The danger finally came from inside the lit house, instead of the car in the driveway. My worst childhood had been a rehearsal. On the floor of that garage, it stood up and ran the show. I took out my own phone, my real one, and I began to photograph the second phone's screen, frame after frame, a photograph of a photograph, evidence of the evidence, because some part of me had already leapt ahead to a room with detectives in it and understood the one thing that would save my life. A phone taped under a bench can vanish, but an image sent out of this house tonight cannot be untaken. So I sent them as I went, to my own email, to my sister Rachel. No words, just the pictures, because there were none yet, and because the dusty clock was eating my 40 minutes one tick at a time. Then, because the cold woman was thorough in a way the old Emma never was, I stopped looking at the pictures and started going through the phone the way he would never want me to. There was almost nothing on it, which is its own kind of terror. A real phone is a junk drawer, and this was a scalpel. 2 things only, the pictures, and in the notes, a single list, not groceries, habits, times, my alarm code in his small square hand. Runs alone Tuesday, Thursday, Park Loop. Sister visits monthly, stays over. And near the bottom, underlined once the way he underlined things he really meant. Get dog first, no dog after. I read get dog first 4 times before I understood it, and when I understood it, I put my own hand over my own mouth in the dark, because our fat, gentle beagle was asleep on the kitchen floor above me, and there is only one kind of plan, in which the dog is a problem you handle in advance. And then I went very still and listened up through the floorboards, and I could not hear the click of his nails, or the thump of him rolling over, or any of the small sounds that animal made all day long. I could not remember, I realized, hearing the dog since I came downstairs. Chapter 10. I found the map next, and the map is the thing I still see when I close my eyes. It was in the phone's own Maps app, and he had saved places on it the way you and I save a good restaurant. A little constellation of pinned stars, and the stars were houses. Ours was one of them. I know my own roof from above the way I know my own hand. But there were others. 4, and scattered across the metro and out past it. One so far the map had to zoom out to hold it. And each pin when I touched it, open to a name that was not a name, just a letter. Ours was pinned M, and it took me a sick swimming moment to understand the M did not stand for anything in my name, that it stood for some category, some slot in a system I was only one small part of, and the nearest other star across the river was pinned K. I found the folder to match it under the photo app, tucked beneath the others, named with that single letter. I opened it, because I opened everything now, and inside it was another woman, younger than me, or the pictures were older, I couldn't tell. Dark hair where mine is fair, but everything else was the same, and the sameness turned my stomach to water. Photographed the way I was photographed, through windows, from yards, at a sink that was not my sink, dated, catalogued. A whole year of another woman living her unaware ordinary days, with no idea that the person she trusted most was standing in the dark outside her glass, collecting her. And I knew her. That was the detonation. I had seen that face in exactly one place, a single photograph David kept in a shoebox on the closet shelf, shown to me once, early, with a sad and practiced sigh, back when we were still trading our histories. Karen, his first wife. Karen, who David always said in that gentle, rehearsed voice, had left him, packed a bag one weekend while he traveled, moved to Arizona, cut off contact, broke his heart, taught him not to trust. The sad, clean story that had made me want, more than anything, to be the good woman who healed him. Karen had not moved to Arizona. I did not know yet what had happened to her, but I knew, with the certainty of the stare that is not there, that whatever happened to the woman in the folder named K was the thing being prepared, one photograph at a time for me. And now the question had teeth. Her folder was closed. Mine was still being filled. The only difference between Karen and me was not that he loved me more. It was that she was finished, and I was not finished yet. So how much time did a folder take to finish? And how far along was mine? There was a Files app too, almost empty, and in it, 3 photographs of paper. I almost swiped past them, because after the pictures of myself, paper seemed like nothing. And then I read what the paper was, and the floor tilted a second time. The first was a life insurance policy. On me. Term life, a number with more zeros than our mortgage, taken out 14 months ago, which I knew because there was a second photograph of the application, and the date was in the corner, and the signature at the bottom was mine. My own signature on a document I had never seen. I thought back standing in that cold garage, and I could almost find the moment. A stack of papers he'd slid across the kitchen table on some ordinary Sunday. Refinance stuff. Babe, just initial where the tabs are. And I had initialed where the tabs were. Because we did not keep secrets. Because a wife who reads every page of what her husband hands her is a wife who does not trust him. And he had taught me that not trusting him was the one unforgivable thing. I had signed my own price into being over coffee and not even looked up. And the third photograph was a note in his small square hand, a single line that I have never been able to unsee. Policy pays double for accident, so make it an accident. I want to tell you what that did to the shape of everything, because it is the question that ate the next weeks alive. The one even Ruiz kept turning over. Because now there were 2 Davids in that garage, and I could not tell which one I was married to. Was this a man who killed for money, who insured his wives and drowned them, and collected the checks, and the photographs, the folders, the watching, were just how a cold man passed the long, patient months until the payout? A business with me as the inventory? Or was it the other way around? Was the money the excuse, the cover story he told the Dash, and maybe even told himself, and the real thing, the thing he actually could not live without, was the window, the collecting, the owning of an unaware woman in a warm, lit box, and the insurance was just how a careful predator made his obsession pay for itself. Did he want me dead for the money, or did he want me watched forever, and the money was simply the tidy way to end a folder once it was full? I did not know. Standing there, I could not tell, and I am not sure I can tell you now, at the end of all of it, which of those two men slid that refinance stack across my kitchen table. And I think that is the truest and most frightening thing I learned about him, that he was both, seamlessly, and that a man can hold a spreadsheet and an obsession in the same hand and feel no seam between them at all. Chapter 11. There was one more thing, and I almost didn't find it. And if I had run when my whole body begged me to run, I never would have. And I'd have gone to the police with a nightmare instead of a case. A messaging app. Not the green one everyone has. A locked one. The kind that deletes itself, and it opened without asking because he'd stayed signed in, careless in the one place he was sure no one would ever stand. One conversation. The contact saved as a single character. Not a letter this time. A dash. A short, flat line. I read it from the bottom up, and the newest message was from that afternoon. From 3 hours ago, while I was at the store buying the chicken I was upstairs keeping warm. And the Dash had written, "Clean weekend coming. You set?" And David had written back, "Sister's in town next weekend." After that, windows open the 19th. And the Dash had written, "Don't drag it. You dragged the last one." And David had written, and I read this standing up because I could not read it sitting down, "Won't. Did the Beagle thing yet. She's easy. She doesn't look. She doesn't look." I stood in my garage holding a phone that called me easy, that called me a woman who doesn't look. And 3 things landed on me at once, each its own separate blow. The first, there was another person, a someone. A Dash who spoke the same flat logistics language my husband spoke in this hidden mouth, who reviewed his work, who said don't drag it like this, had a rhythm, a history, a last one. My husband was not a lone monster in a garage. My husband had a colleague. Who? Who in the world was on the other end of that line, and how many of us were there? The second, the date. The 19th. It was the 12th. My sister was coming next weekend, the way she came every month. And after the witness went home, a window opened, and I was standing inside the 7 days before it. And the third, the one that made even the calm one go quiet, was, did the dog thing yet? And the silence over my head where our dog should have been. That was when the headlights swept the crack under the garage door, tires in the driveway. Too early. And above me the front door opened, and my husband's voice came down warm and easy and wrong. "Em, we're home." Practice got cut short. Part 3, The Dinner, Chapter 12. I have never moved so fast and so carefully at the same time in my life. The body can do a strange thing when the alternative is dying. It can be a surgeon and a sprinter in the same breath. Every cell in me screamed to take the phone, to close my fist around the proof and go out the side door into the storm. And the cold woman put her hand flat on that scream and held it down and said, "If you take it, he reaches under this bench tonight or tomorrow and finds raw wood where his phone was. And then he knows." And a man who writes, "Get dog first," does not confront a wife who knows. He solves her. Put it back exactly, and go up those stairs and be the woman who never pries. I pressed the phone to the tape and made the corners meet the way they had met, and then I did the thing I am, on my better nights, most proud of in my whole life. I took one more photograph of the tape, the exact angle of it, the little curl at one corner, so that when I put my own phone away, I would know I had matched it, and so that if it were ever asked of me in a room with a jury, I could say I documented the concealment. I did not disturb it. I only borrowed the truth and gave it back. Then I found the flashlight, rolled behind a row of paint cans exactly where I would later tell him it had rolled, and I made myself breathe, and I climbed the 3 wooden steps into my kitchen to have dinner with the man who had photographed me sleeping. The dog was in his bed by the pantry. I saw him the instant I came up, and the relief went through me so hard I had to put my hand on the counter. Because his fat side was going up and down, he was only asleep, but asleep more deeply than the storm and the opening door should have allowed, and I did not let myself finish that thought either. I filed it in the cold drawer with the others and turned around into the light. "There she is," David said. He was at the counter with his sleeves pushed up, pouring Chloe a glass of milk, and he smiled the smile I had married, open, boyish, tired at the eyes. And I understood, for the first time in 7 years, that I had never once seen the face underneath it, that the smile was the mask, that I had spent 7 years in love with a mask and let it father my child. Power flickered, I said. Level. I do not know how. Wanted the good flashlight before it goes for real. Smart. He crossed the kitchen and kissed my temple, the exact spot he always kissed, and I did not flinch. And I need you to understand that not flinching was the hardest physical act I have ever performed, harder than childbirth, harder than anything, because every nerve I owned wanted to come out of my skin, and his mouth was warm and dry and ordinary against my hair, and I thought you stood in the yard in January and waited for me to undress, and I turned it into a small, tired smile and asked Chloe how the water was. Dinner was the longest hour of my life, and I lived all of it behind my own eyes, flying a plane I had just been told I never actually knew how to fly. Chloe talked about the swim meet, about a girl named Priya who could do a flip turn, about whether we could please get the good popsicles, and I said the right things. "That's wonderful, baby. We'll see. Eat your green beans." And David said the right things, and the private horror of it, the one I will never be able to make another living person feel, was how good we both were at it, how ordinary the table looked. If you had walked past our window right then, out of the dark of the yard, the way he had walked past 100 windows, you would have seen a happy family under a warm light, and you would have been wrong about every single thing. Twice I caught him looking at me, not the way a husband looks, the way a man checks a gauge, a quick flat flick of the eyes, reading the needle, then away. And each time my stomach went through the floor, because I could not tell if he was seeing something on my face, or if this was simply what he had always done, and I had only tonight been given the eyes to see it. He had been reading me like this for 7 years. I had called it attentiveness, and now the question sat at the table with us, passing the green beans. Did he know? Had he felt me somehow, down there among his careful things? Or was I watching an innocent man eat chicken and losing my mind? Chapter 13. Then, as I was clearing the plates, David said it, in the most casual voice in the world, not even looking up from his real phone. "You were down there a while, in the garage." The kitchen went very far away and very quiet. I was standing at the sink with a plate in my hand, in front of the window, the black yard behind the glass, and my own pale reflection hanging in it. And I understood that the next sentence out of my mouth was the most important one of my life. "The flashlight rolled behind your paint cans," I said. "I about tore the shelf apart. You've got, 40 cans of the same gray down there?" I did not turn around. I kept my hands in the dishwater because dishwater hides a tremor, and my hands had started to go, and I ran the tap so the sound of it would be a thing between us, and I waited to find out if I was going to live. David laughed, a small, real-sounding laugh. "It is not the same gray," he said. "There's repose gray and agreeable gray, and Chloe's room is mindful gray, and if you'd ever once let me talk about paint, you'd know the difference." And he went back to his phone, and the kitchen came back, and I stood there with my hands in the warm water and understood two things at once: that I had just passed a test I could never afford to fail again, and that I could not stay in this house one more night, and could not simply run either, because a man who plans to the 19th does not leave the doors he owns unwatched, and somewhere, out there, a dash was waiting to be told it was done. I needed a reason, not a lie he might pick at with those flat eyes, a true thing, an ordinary, boring true thing that would let me carry my daughter out of this house tonight without one alarm going off in that watchful head. And drying my hands on the towel that hung where it always hung, I found one, sitting in plain sight the whole time. Rachel's birthday was that weekend. I had told David days ago I might drive out. It was on the fridge in dry erase marker. It was in the shared calendar he could open any time, and a man like that checks. The truest, most boring alibi in the world, and it was a door, and it had been standing open the entire time I was drowning. "Hey," I said, and turned around with the face of a woman, remembering a mild annoyance. "Since practice got cut short, I think Chloe and I might just head to Rachel's tonight instead of Saturday. Beat the storm. You know how 94 floods by the river. Her birthday thing's early anyway." I watched him decide whether to believe me. I watched my husband run my sentence through whatever machine he ran everything through, and I smiled at him with my whole heart, the biggest lie my body has ever told. "Good idea," he said. "Beat the weather." And then, easy, to my back as I turned for the stairs. "Tell Rachel happy birthday. She's staying long this trip?" And I understood the question under the question. He was confirming the calendar. He was checking whether the witness would be in the house on the 19th. I said, bored over my shoulder, "The usual, a night or two. You know how she is." And I climbed the stairs feeling his flat eyes on my back the whole way up, and I still do not know to this day whether I fooled him or whether he let me think I did, because letting me think so was simply the faster road to the 19th. Chapter 14. The worst moment of the whole dinner did not come from David. It came from Chloe, and it is the reason I know that a child sees more than we ever let ourselves believe. We were nearly done. I had my alibi set, my exit built, and I was counting the minutes until I could stand up from that table without it looking like fleeing, and Chloe, swirling a green bean through her ketchup, said, out of nowhere, in the bright, careless way of a 9-year-old, "Mommy, why were you crying in the garage?" The kitchen did not stop, because I did not let it stop, but everything in me went to ice. I had not been crying that she could have seen. She'd been in the car asleep. But children build their own facts out of the air they breathe, and she had felt something come up the stairs with me, some wrongness with no name, and had filed it, the way I used to file the sound of a car door, and now she had set it on the table between me and the man with the flat, reading eyes, and I felt his attention turn. Not sharply. That was the terror of him. Nothing was ever sharp. Just a small settling of his focus onto me, the gauge swinging over, waiting to see how the needle moved. And the cold woman answered before the ice could reach my face. I laughed, a real-sounding laugh. I do not know where I found it. And I said, "Oh, baby, that wasn't crying. That was Mommy sneezing her head off. You know how the garage gets me. All that dust." And I made a big, goofy, sneezing face at her, and she giggled, because she is 9, and a goofy face is a whole answer, and the moment folded up and was gone. But I felt David watch me build that lie in real time, watch me take my daughter's dangerous true thing and turn it, smooth and quick, into dust and a sneeze. And I have wondered ever since whether that was the moment he decided he did not need to wait for the 19th. Because a man who has spent 7 years believing his wife does not look had just watched her lie to his face, beautifully, without a flicker, to cover something she had seen. And a collector notices when the specimen turns out to be able to do the one thing he was sure she couldn't. I got Chloe down from the table. I kissed the top of her head and told her to go pick out pajamas. My good girl, my whole heart, the small, warm reason I was going to get us both out of this house, alive. And I did not look back at David because I could feel him still reading me, and I had nothing left in my face to give him but the performance of a tired mother on an ordinary night. And I gave him that, and I climbed the stairs. I packed for Chloe with hands gone strangely calm, the way water goes calm when it is finally deep enough. I did not pack for a night. I packed for a life, but I packed it to look like a night. A few shirts, the stuffed rabbit with the chewed ear, her inhaler, nothing that would tell a watching man his wife was never coming home. Chloe stood in her doorway in her pajamas and asked in the small, careful voice children use when they've felt a change in the air they can't name, if everything was okay. And I knelt and held her face in my 2 hands and told her the truth in the only size she could carry. "Everything is okay, baby. We're going to Aunt Rachel's for a surprise. I need you to be my helper, quick and quiet, like a game, like we're sneaking to beat the rain." She nodded. She is a good girl. She is the whole reason I did not come apart on that floor and stay there. And then I heard it. The door to the garage, opening. David's feet on the wooden steps going down. I stood in Chloe's room with the packed bag in my hand and could not breathe, because I knew exactly where he was going. He was going to the workbench, maybe for the umbrella, maybe for nothing, maybe because a careful man checks his careful things when his wife has spent 20 minutes alone near them and then announced on a storm night, out of nowhere, that she is leaving. I stood at the top of my house and stared down the hall at the garage door and counted my own heartbeats and waited to hear the one small sound that would end the world, the tacky little peal of tape, the sound of a phone lifted and turned over and read, somehow, as a thing that had been opened, a thing that had been found, a thing that meant the woman upstairs was not a picture anymore. She was a witness. The seconds went by like furniture dragged across a floor. I heard him moving down there, a scrape, then nothing, which was worse, a long, flat nothing. And into that nothing, I made the decision I have had to make my peace with every day since. That if he came up those stairs wrong, if the boyish face was off his face when he came around the corner, I was going out the front door with my daughter in my arms, and I was not stopping, not for keys, not for shoes. I would run into the storm barefoot and scream until every porch light on the street came on. Because a scene in the rain is survivable, and whatever he had planned in the quiet was not. His feet came back to the stairs. They came up, slow, and a man's feet on a staircase do not tell you whether he is still your husband. He came around the corner holding an umbrella. "For the walk to the car," he said, and held it out, and his face was the smiling mask, boyish, tired at the eyes, unreadable, and I could not tell, I still cannot tell, whether he had lifted that phone and seen something and decided in one cold second to let me drive away and simply move the date up, or whether he had truly just gotten an umbrella for his wife because it was raining. I think not knowing that is the thing that will follow me into whatever room I die in. I took the umbrella. I said thank you. Our fingers touched on the handle, and I buckled my daughter into the back seat while my husband stood in the lit doorway of our house, backlit, one hand raised, the perfect picture of a good man watching his family drive off safe into the rain. Part 4. The Hunt. Chapter 15. I did not drive to my sister's. I drove 4 blocks to where the streetlight was out in front of the Delgados, that one dead lamp I'd complained about at every block party, and I put the car in park under the cover of its dark, with my hand shaking so hard I could barely work the gear shift. In the mirror, Chloe had already gone loose and heavy against her belt, asleep the way only children can fall asleep, inside a catastrophe they cannot see, and I was grateful for it because what I did next, I could not have done with her awake. I called the police, and then I called Rachel, and I said the words out loud for the first time, first to a calm dispatcher, then to my sister, and saying them made them real in a way photographing them had not. My husband has been taking pictures of me through our windows for a year. There's a hidden phone. There's another woman, his first wife, the one he always said moved to Arizona. I don't think she'd gone to Arizona. There's a map with our house on it and other houses on it. There's a date. I think the date is for me. The dispatcher stayed very calm with me, in the specific way that told me she'd stopped being calm the second she pulled up my address, because I had already forwarded from a cold garage floor 40 minutes of proof to 2 inboxes he could not reach. That was the thing the man who planned to the 19th had not planned for. He had built his whole life around being the only one who ever really looked. He had never once imagined that his easy wife, the one who looks away, would spend her 40 minutes looking harder and colder than he ever had. The police went to the house that night. He was not there. They found dinner dishes in the rack, a beagle asleep on his bed, a child's towel over a chair, and a workbench with a curl of old tape stuck to the underside of it, and nothing beneath it. He had taken the phone. Of course he had. Between the moment I backed out of the driveway and the moment the first cruiser rolled up, my husband had gone down his 3 wooden steps one last time, peeled his careful thing off his careful bench, and walked out of the life we'd built, like a man stepping off a stage he was finished with. By morning, his truck was in the long-term lot at the airport, and he was on no flight anyone could find, which, a detective would explain to me, is exactly what a truck in an airport lot is for. It is not for flying. It is for making tired people look at the sky. So now it was my photographs against an empty bench, and a new question, the one that would own the next weeks of my life. Where do you hide from a man who spent a year studying exactly where you'd run? Chapter 16. Nobody believed me for the first 31 hours, and I want you to sit in those hours with me, because they are the ones that nearly killed us, and because they are the reason I will never again roll my eyes at a woman who says nobody listened. I had the photographs. I had sent 40 minutes of proof to 2 inboxes from a garage floor, and still, the first officers who took my statement in Rachel's front room at 2 a.m. were kind to me, in the specific way people are kind to someone they have already decided is unwell. A stressed marriage, one of them said, gently, not unkindly. Had David and I been having trouble? Was it possible? He chose the word so carefully. Was it possible I had found some texts, an affair maybe, and upset, understandably upset, had read more into them than was there? Because here is what a photograph of a woman at a sink does not prove. Who took it? And here is what a deleting app screenshot of a man saying she's easy, she doesn't look, does not prove, to a tired officer at 2 a.m. that she means a murder and not a mistress. Maybe your husband is just a creep, the kinder of the two, all but said. Maybe he's cheating and hiding it badly. Go home. Change your locks. Talk to a lawyer. And the clock in my head screamed the 19th, the 19th, and I understood, sitting on my sister's couch with a cold cup of tea I couldn't drink, that the most dangerous gap in the whole story was this one. The gap between a woman who knows and a system that needs proof. The gap a man like David lives inside, because he had built a life that looked, from the outside, through the window, like every other stressed suburban marriage in the county. He had counted on exactly this. A wife who runs sounds hysterical. A wife who accuses sounds jealous. He had spent 7 years making me look like the unreliable one, so that on the night it mattered, my truth would sound like a breakdown. What saved us was not the photographs in the end. It was the date stamps, and it was a records clerk 2 states away, and it was luck. Rachel, my sister, who has known me since before I could talk, who knew the difference in my voice between upset and certain, did not go home and change her locks. She got on the phone at 7 a.m. and did not stop, and somewhere in the next day, a name surfaced in a database, a first wife who was supposed to be in Arizona and was in no state at all, and the whole tired machine that had been ready to send me home turned over in an instant and became something with sirens. But it took 31 hours, and every one of them I counted, because I was still inside the 7 days before the 19th, and I did not know, sitting on that couch, not being believed, whether the machine would wake up in time, or whether I would become one more woman a kind officer had once gently suggested was imagining things. Chapter 17. The detective's name was Ruiz, and she had a flat, unhurried way of talking that reminded me at first horribly of him, until I understood it was the opposite. His flatness was a man with nothing underneath. Hers was a woman carrying so much underneath, she'd learned to walk level so it wouldn't spill. She came out to Rachel's on the 3rd day and laid it out for me, because she'd decided I was a person who did better knowing than not knowing, and she was right, and I have thanked her for that read of me more than once. The dash was real. The deleting app had eaten most of it, but not the pieces I'd photographed with my own cracked phone, and those were enough to establish that David had been talking to another person about scheduling something in language a jury would not need translated. They did not know yet who the dash was. Ruiz would not guess in front of me, which I respected, but she sat with the word colleague the way I had, turning it over because it did not fit a buyer and did not fit a partner. A partner says we. The dash only ever said you. You set. You dragged, don't you? As if the dash were not helping him do the thing, but standing just behind his shoulder, making sure he did it a particular way. And Karen was real. When they ran the folder named K against David's first wife, and ran that name against the databases that hold the people who quietly stop existing, they did not find a woman living her best, sunburned life in Arizona. They found a missing person report, filed 11 years ago by Karen's sister, in a different state, under a different last name than the one David used now, closed 3 years later for lack of anything to hold, because Karen, everyone had been told, in that gentle rehearsed voice, had moved away and cut everyone off. He had told 2 families the same story. He had a story he reused, the way he reused a note, because a man who does a thing more than once builds tools, and the Arizona story was a tool, and I had been handed it over a shoebox and thanked him for trusting me with it. Then Ruiz put a printout on Rachel's table, face down, and kept her hand on it, and told me to take my time. It was my photograph of his map, blown up, all the pinned stars. "These 2, she said, touching 2 of the far pins. "We've matched to open cases, Missouri, the Panhandle, both women, both reported to have moved away suddenly, cut off contact. Nobody connected them because there was nothing to connect them. Different names, different states, years apart." She let that sit. Then she moved her finger to a nearer pin, 1 town over from where we sat, and said, "This one's recent. He was still building it. I need you to tell me whose house this is." I looked at the little photograph the pin opened to, a gray house with a red door and a wind chime on the porch, a wind chime I had given as a housewarming gift, because I had stood on that porch, because I had hung that chime myself. It was Rachel's house, taken from the tree line behind her back fence, in the dark, from the exact angle I was, at that moment, sitting inside. Chapter 18. I did not scream. I put my hand over Chloe's crayon drawing on the table, the one of the 4 of us and the beagle and a son, and slid it toward me, out from under the map. And I said, "That's my sister's house. He's been here." Rachel made a sound in the kitchen doorway that I will hear for the rest of my life, because it meant the one safe place in the world, the coffee on and lights on and I am not going to bed place, was already a pinned star in his collection. He had stood behind my sister's fence in the dark at some point in the last months, and that meant one of 2 unbearable things. Either he had been preparing Rachel as another folder, patient, unhurried, a woman 2 hours away living her ordinary days with no idea, or, and Ruiz said this part very carefully, watching my face, he had been preparing Rachel's house as the place his wife would run. Because a man who studies a woman for a year knows where she runs, and a man who writes "get dog" first thinks about where the loose ends go. I had not driven away from him. I had driven to a spot on his map. They moved us that night somewhere on no calendar and no fridge and no shared account, and I made them let me do one thing first. I made them let me walk through my own house. Ruiz didn't want me to. She said a tech could photograph anything I needed. I said I needed to stand in it once, knowing what I knew. She came with me herself. It is a strange thing to walk through your own home as a crime scene. The dishes still in the rack, my coffee cup with a ring dried in the bottom. I saved the bedroom for last, and I don't fully know why, except that the bedroom was the one room I still, stupidly, thought of as ours, the one place the window pictures hadn't reached, because the window pictures of the bedroom were shot through the curtains, from outside, and there was a small sick comfort in outside, in the glass having been between us, in the idea that at least when I slept, I'd been alone. I stood in the doorway and looked at the bed we'd shared for 7 years, and I was about to turn and go when something caught the way the tape had caught under my fingers. The smoke detector, over the bed. It was on the wrong wall. They go near the door, near the hall, and he'd mounted that one himself 2 years ago, said the old one was chirping. Ruiz took out her little flashlight and put the beam on the small white disc over my marriage bed, and in the center of it, where a smoke detector has a little light that blinks to say it's working, there was not a little light. There was a lens, and every belief I had left came apart, because the window pictures, the whole horror I'd been carrying, had let me keep one thing without knowing I was keeping it. The belief that when I slept, most undefended, most mine, I had been alone. And I had not been alone. He had lain down beside me every night for 2 years and waited for my breathing to go long and slow, and then he had watched me on a screen, the same sleeping woman he could have simply rolled over and touched, because touching was never it. Being near was never it. The whole point, the entire point, was the glass, the screen, the woman who does not know she is seen. He'd had a better view than the yard the whole time. He just liked the yard better. Chapter 19. For a while I was sure the dash was Tom. I need to tell you about being wrong, because being wrong is most of what the middle of this was, and because I think you have been trying to solve it too, the way I was, and I want you to feel how it felt to be certain, and to be certain of the wrong thing. Tom Riley was David's oldest friend. They had built the Workbench together. One weekend years ago, the two of them, and a case of beer, and a laugh I could hear from the kitchen. Tom was around all the time, at every barbecue, and there had always been something about the way he looked at me, a half second too long, something I had filed under harmless. Under men are like that, under keep your surface calm. And now, with the whole world turned inside out, that half second bloomed into a certainty. Tom knew the house. Tom had helped build the very bench the phone was taped under. Tom had been in my yard 100 times and could have learned the black edge of the yard in his sleep. The dash said you dragged the last one, like a man who had watched the last one, and who had watched David longer than Tom. I built the case in my head at 3 in the morning, brick by brick, until it was a wall, and then I took it to Ruiz, shaking. Sure, I had cracked it. Ruiz did not laugh at me. That is one of the reasons I trusted her. She wrote it down, she ran it, she treated my 3 in the morning wall like evidence. And then, gently, 2 days later, she took it apart. Tom had been in Denver the week of the 19th that never happened, at a conference, 300 people and a hotel key card that logged every door. Tom had cried, actual tears, when they told him what his friend had done in the garage they built together. Tom was exactly what he looked like, a slightly lonely man who had looked at his friend's wife a half second too long at barbecues and hated himself for it, and nothing more, not the dash, just a sad, ordinary man, cleared and gone. And I sat in Rachel's kitchen with my certainty in pieces and understood something that should have frightened me more than it did. I had wanted it to be Tom, because Tom I could see. Tom had a face, a body, a hotel key card, a place on the map of the world. The dash had none of those things. The dash was a flat line on a screen and a voice with no throat, and every time I tried to put a face to it, my mind reached for someone I already knew, because the alternative, that it was someone I had never met, someone who knew my husband better than his oldest friend did, someone who had been standing in his dark for longer than I had been alive to David, was so much worse. I had built a wall around Tom to keep from having to look at the empty place where the real answer was. And the real answer when it finally came, was standing in the back of a courtroom with dark hair and my own dread on the back of her neck. But I'm getting ahead of myself. I had not earned that yet. In the middle, I was just a woman who had been certain and wrong, and I have to make you sit in the wrongness with me a moment, because the story does that to you on purpose, and so did he. Chapter 20. They almost had him twice, and both times taught me the same thing, which was that he was always a half step ahead of the people trying to catch him, the way he had been a half step ahead of me for 7 years. The first was a gas station 2 counties north. 4 days in, a clerk recognized the face from the alert and called it in, and for 1 bright hour I let myself believe it was over, sitting at Rachel's table watching her not watch the clock. But by the time the cars got there, he was gone, and what he'd left was worse than nothing. He'd paid cash. He'd bought a road atlas, a phone charger, and the detail that put Ruiz very quiet on the phone, a child's coloring book, and a box of the good popsicles, the exact ones Chloe had been begging for, the ones I would not buy. He had stood at a gas station counter with the whole state hunting him and bought my daughter's popsicles and left the receipt where a camera would see it because he wanted me to know he was still shopping for our family. He was not fleeing. He was grocery shopping for a life he still believed he was going to have. The second was a motel, 11 days in, and he was gone before the door came down, and the room was wiped so clean, the text said, it was like no one had breathed in it, except for one thing, set in the exact center of the made bed, squared to the corners, a photograph of Rachel's front porch. My sister's porch, the wind chime I'd hung, taken that week. He was telling us that running the hunt did not mean he had stopped being the hunter, that even now cornered, he had time and attention to spare for the next window and the next. And I want to tell you about Rachel, because she is the reason I am alive to tell any of it, and because the 2 of us at that table those weeks were not 2 grown women. We were the girls at the top of the stairs again, the older one and the younger one, except this time the bad night sound was not a car door. It was a photograph on a made bed, and this time I was not going to get her out the back and wait for the lights to go off. This time, we were going to make the lights go off ourselves. She never once asked if I was sure. She had known my voice since before I could talk, the difference in it between upset and certain. And she heard the certain, and she put the coffee on and did not go to bed, night after night. And she said the thing our mother never once said to us in that whole frightened childhood. She said, "We are not keeping our faces nice about this. We are not going to be quiet and hope it passes over. Not this time." And something in me that had been 8 years old for 30 years finally stood up. Chapter 21. Here is the thing I have never told the detectives and never told Rachel, and am telling you now only because the whole point of telling a true thing is to tell the part that costs you something. The 40 minutes in the garage were not the first time I looked. I have let everyone believe I was the woman who doesn't look, right up until a flickered light and a lost flashlight put the truth in my hand by accident. It's a good story. It lets people love the version of me who was innocent and then brave. But it is not the whole truth. Because I told you about the cracks, the dark glass I turned my back on, the corner I didn't touch, some animal part of me pulling at my sleeve all autumn. What I did not tell you is what I did about them. In August, 2 months before the storm, on an afternoon David was at work, I went into the garage for no reason I could name, and I stood at his workbench, and I ran my hand along the underside of it, and I felt the tape and the shape under it, and I took my hand away and walked back upstairs and made a decision I have never forgiven and never regretted, not yet, because I had a 9-year-old and no proof and a husband the whole street envied, and I knew the way you know these things without letting yourself say them, that a woman who runs with nothing gets called unstable and sent home, and a woman who runs with everything gets believed. So I did not lift the tape in August. I photographed the closed drawer of that bench instead, and I sent it to myself, and I began quietly, the way he did everything, to get ready. A go bag in the trunk under the spare. A single word agreed with Rachel. One word, and that if I ever texted it, she was to call the police and not me. Cash. Copies of Chloe's papers in a place that was not our house. I had been building my 40 minutes for 2 months before the night I needed them. The flashlight was luck. The rest was not. He taught me to be patient and unhurried, and to look like a person who isn't looking. And I had been his best student in the whole world, and he never knew it, because the one thing a collector cannot photograph is what is going on behind the glass he thinks he's looking through. So when the envelope came, and one did, on the 20th day after he vanished, to the rented place that was on no calendar, addressed in a small square hand, I would know in the dark from the grave, containing a single photograph of that building, taken from across the parking lot I'd spent 19 nights watching, stamped with yesterday's date. I did not fall down. He meant it to make me the girl at the landing again, frozen, listening, waiting for the storm to pass over. He had found the place that was on no map, and he'd shown me my own trick played back at me, to tell me the quiet part. I can reach you anywhere, anytime I choose. But he had made one mistake, not of caution. He doesn't make those, but of understanding. He thought fear would make me small. He did not know, could not know, because it was the one thing his year of watching never caught, that the girl at the top of the stairs did not freeze. She got people out. He thought he was showing a rabbit the hawk. He was showing the one animal in the whole world who had been trained since the age of 8 to move a child through a dangerous house and keep her expression easy the entire way. I called Ruiz that night, with my hands finally still, and I said, "He wants ground he's chosen. Let's give him ground I've chosen, and let him think it's his." Part 5. The Glass. Chapter 22. I have to take you back a few weeks, to before Ruiz moved us to the place on no calendar, because the Tuesday he surfaced at Chloe's school is the day I stopped being prey, and everything I did after, the trap, the sink, the 8 days of bait, started there. It was a Tuesday. I had, against every instinct, let a piece of the old life back in, because a child needs some ordinary, or the fear becomes the whole world. Chloe had a half day and a friend's birthday, and Ruiz's people knew the route and the times, and I told myself I could do one normal pickup at one normal school in the middle of one normal afternoon. I parked in the lot at 2:40 with the other parents, in the sun, with the crossing guard and the minivans and the little kids streaming out under a sky with nothing in it, and I let my shoulders come down for the first time in weeks. And then I saw the truck, across the lot, in the far row, backed in the way he always backed in, nose out, ready, a habit I'd teased him about for years, who backs into a school pickup, and the world went silent the way it goes silent underwater. Same make, same color, same little cluster of stickers I could not read at that distance, and did not need to read, because my body had already read them. My body was already up out of the seat of itself, and the competent one was there instantly. No ramp, no warning. 8 years old and 39 at once. And she said one word, "Chloe." I did not run, because running is a scene, and a scene brings him to you. I walked. I walked to the doors with my face nice, my mother's whole religion, my face so nice. And I found my daughter in the crush of children and crouched down and said, in the bright game voice, "Hey baby, change of plan. We're going to do something fun. I need my fast helper." And she looked at me for 1 second with those eyes that have always seen more than I want them to, and then she took my hand and went quick and quiet. My good girl. The truck was still there. I put her in on the far side, my body between her and the far row the whole time, and I pulled out slow and ordinary, and I watched the mirror, and the truck pulled out too. I did everything, the calm one said. I did not go home. I made 3 rights, which no one makes by accident, and the truck made 2 of them, and then a car slid between us at a light, and I took a gap I had no business taking, and I was gone, into a subdivision I picked because it had 2 exits, and I called Ruiz with my voice absolutely level, while Chloe sang to herself in the back, never knowing. They found the truck abandoned 9 blocks from the school 40 minutes later, wiped, registered to one of his dead names. He had been there. He had backed into a space at our daughter's school and waited in the sun among the other parents, and when I finally arrived, he had let me see him, because being seen was never the danger with him. Being seen was the message, and the message was, I can stand in the ordinary light, right next to the one thing you would burn the world for, any afternoon I choose. But he had made a mistake, not of caution. He does not make those, but of understanding. He thought fear would make me small. He did not know, could not know, because it is the one thing his year of watching never caught, that the girl at the top of the staircase did not freeze. She got people out. He thought he was showing a rabbit the hawk. He was showing the one animal in that whole lot who had been trained since the age of 8 to move a child through a dangerous place and keep her face composed the entire way. He meant to break me at that school. Instead, he taught me the last thing I needed to know, which was that I was done running his route. Within the week, Ruiz had Chloe 2 states away behind serious people, and I had stopped asking to be hidden and started telling Ruiz how the 2 of us were going to end it. Chapter 23. We used the house, my house, the one on the pinned star marked M, the one he knew down to the paint names. Because the thing about a man who has memorized a place is that his confidence in it is a door you can hold open for him. Ruiz staged it over 8 days, a slow trickle of the signs he'd read as truth. My car back in the driveway some evenings, a light at the sink at 9, the performance of a woman who had come home because she couldn't stay gone, because the case had stalled, because she was tired and unbelieved, and had nowhere else. It was a story he would want to be true, because it was the story where he wins. Chloe was 2 states away with a detail of very serious people. It was only ever going to be me in that house, and Ruiz's people breathing in the dark where he couldn't see them, and the black glass over the sink, and the weight. You do not understand what it costs to become bait until you are standing in the exact frame you were hunted in, on purpose, night after night, washing a pan you have already washed. Every night at 9, I stood where he had photographed me 100 times and performed the thing he loved most in the world, an unaware woman in a warm lit box. And I did it aware, which is a splitting of the self I cannot fully describe. The hardest night was the 6th, when nothing happened but a raccoon in the side yard, and I stood there 40 minutes past the mark, because turning around meant admitting I could feel that old pressure at the base of my skull, and could no longer tell which nights the dark held him and which nights it held nothing. And I understood, standing there, the exact size of what he had taken from every woman in every folder, not only their lives, the dark, the safe, ordinary dark you are supposed to be able to stand in front of at your own sink and feel nothing but the day ending. He had put himself inside it forever, and on the 6th night, I decided he would not keep it, that I would take the dark back if it took me the rest of my life, one clean pan at a time. He came on the 8th night, in the rain. Of course, in the rain, because the rain is a curtain, and he was a man who loved a curtain. He did not come to the glass. He came to the side door, the garage door, his door, the one he'd walked down 10,000 times, because a man returns to his own bench, and that was the thing I had bet the whole night on, that when it came to it, he would not be able to resist entering his life through the one place he thought was only his. And Ruiz had that door. I heard it through the floorboards, the way I had heard everything the first night. The handle, the pause, his feet on the wooden steps going down into the dark toward the tape and the raw wood where his secret used to be. They took him at his own workbench with his hand reaching up under the bench top toward a curl of tape and nothing beneath it, which I like to think was the last thing his fingers ever touched as a free man, the exact absence I had left him. I did not turn around. I stood at my sink with my hands in the cold water and did not turn around, because turning around was not part of what I had decided. And when Ruiz finally said, in my ear, "We have him, Emma. It's done. You can turn around now," I turned, and the kitchen was full of people and light, and my reflection was gone from the night-black window because they'd thrown every lamp in the house on at once, and I could not see the dark anymore. And I laughed, one small, ugly, grateful laugh, because after the whole patient year of him, I had brought him home through his own door to a bench with nothing under it, and the woman who does not pry had been, in the end, the one doing all the looking. Chapter 24. Ruiz let me watch him, against every rule, I think, and I have never asked what it cost her. 3 days after the garage, she brought me to a room with a long dark window in one wall, and on the other side of the glass, in a bright, bare room, sat my husband. Sit with the geometry of that, because I never have gotten over it. For 7 years he stood in the dark outside a lit window and looked in at me, and I could not see him. Now I stood in the dark behind a lit window and looked in at him, and he could not see me, and the glass between us was the whole story of my marriage laid flat and made literal. I had wanted this, I understood, from the moment my hand found the tape. Not to hurt him, to be, one time, on the right side of the glass. He was calm. He answered Ruiz's partner in that easy, boyish voice and built the mask in real time, reaching for the good, reasonable man and putting him on like a coat. And it was the most frightening thing I have ever seen. Worse than the photographs, because the photographs were what he did, and this was what he was. A man assembling a person out of parts, because there was no person there to begin with. He said he didn't know what phone they meant. He said his wife had been unwell, that he'd worried for months, that he'd hoped it wouldn't come to this. He said it gently. He said it in the Arizona voice, and I was watching the Arizona voice from the outside for the first time, watching the tool get used, and I understood that a jury would sit where I was sitting one day, and it would be very, very good. Until the partner slid the photograph of the tape across the table. The before and the after matched, and something happened in his face. It was small. If you had not spent 7 years studying that face without knowing you were studying it, you'd have missed it. The flat flick of the eyes, the gauge check. Except this time, I could see what it was reading, and it was not a needle, it was a wall, looking for the way out and not finding one and adjusting. And then the face he wore came back, smooth. But I had seen the seam, and I understood that even caught, even folded, even with the raw wood where his secret used to be, men like him do not run out of it. The only victory against a man who cannot be emptied is to stop needing him to be empty, to walk out of the room and go home to your daughter and let the dark window at your own sink be, at last, just the dark. He did not look at the long window once, not once. A man who spent his life at windows did not glance at the dark one 3 feet from his own reflection. And I told Ruiz about it after, and she went quiet, and then she said, "He knows how one-way glass works, Emma. He didn't look because he didn't want to give you the picture. Even caged, he had found one last thing to withhold, and that, more than anything, is what told me it was not over, that a mind like that does not end, that somewhere it was still collecting." Chapter 25. I was in a room with him one time before the trial, and I need to tell you about it, because it is the closest I ever came to going back, and because I have to bring you close enough to feel how close the door still was, even then, even knowing everything. His lawyers demanded a deposition, and so on a Tuesday in a beige conference room, I sat at a long table with Ruiz beside me and a court reporter tapping, and they brought David in a jacket someone had chosen to make him look like a man who owned a hardware store, and for the first time since the night I drove away in the rain, he saw me, not through glass, not on a screen, me, across a table, close enough to touch, and he did the most frightening thing he could have done. He did not stare, and he did not plead, and he did not perform grief for the reporter. He looked at me the way he used to look at me on a Sunday morning, warm, tired at the eyes, a little amused, and he said, before anyone could start, in the exact voice he used to bring me coffee, "You look tired, Em. Are you sleeping?" And I felt it. God help me. I felt 7 years of my body answer that voice before my mind could catch it. Felt myself start to soften, to say no, not really. The old reflex of being known, of being the one he worried about. And I understood in that half second exactly how the folder gets filled, how a woman stays, how Karen must have taken 11 years to learn what I nearly forgot in one sentence. He was not asking if I slept. He was checking whether the door was still there, whether his key still turned. I did not answer him. I looked at him the way Ruiz had taught me to look at the photograph of the tape, straight on with nothing on my face, and I let the silence sit until it belonged to me instead of him, and I watched the warmth in his eyes flicker, the gauge check, reading the needle and finding it dead. And then, only then, did I understand that I had won something in that beige room that no verdict could give me. He had reached for the woman who softened at his voice, and she was not there anymore. I had gotten her out too, along with Chloe, along with Rachel. I had gotten the last of us out the back door. His lawyer asked their questions. I answered them, and when they led him out, he turned in the doorway, the way he had turned in the doorway of our house with the umbrella, one last look for the collection, and I gave him nothing to keep. I have thought since that it was the only photograph of me he ever failed to take.
Chapter 26.
He wrote to me once from the county facility because a screened letter from an accused man to his wife is a thing the law allows. Ruiz called first to warn me and to say I didn't have to read it. I said I would because I had spent 7 years reading his face and never once seeing it, and I wanted to see one time what he sounded like when he thought he was talking only to me. It did not rage and it did not beg, and that is the thing about the ones who are truly like him. Rage and begging are things you do about a person, and there was no person on the other side of me for him to rage at, only a subject who had done the one thing a subject had never done, which was look back. He wrote that he was not angry. He wrote that he wanted me to understand, because understanding was the only intimacy he had ever really wanted from anyone. I never wanted to hurt you, Emma. Hurting you would have meant you mattered as a body, and you never did. None of them did. What I wanted was the truest version of you, and the truest version of a person is the one who does not know she is being seen. That woman at the sink was real in a way the woman across the dinner table never was. I collected the only real thing there is. Don't let them tell you it was hate. It was the opposite of hate. It was attention. Purer attention than you will ever get from anyone who claims to love you, because they always want something back, and I never wanted anything back. I only wanted to see, and I understood, all the way to the bottom, that he was not lying, that this was the closest thing to true he had ever handed me, and that it was so much worse than a threat. A threat would have meant I still had the power to be feared. This was a man explaining gently that he had never once in 7 years been in the room with me at all. But it was the last line that made me put the letter down and go very still, the line Ruiz's screeners had flagged in yellow because they could not place it. And at first, neither could I. He wrote it not to me, I think, but out loud to himself, the way a man in a cell with no window finally says the frightening thing, because there is no one left to keep his expression pleasant for. Someone has been in my dark. For years I felt it, and told myself it was you, the pressure at my back, the animal that would not settle. I told myself it was you. It wasn't you, Emma. It was never you. Someone has been watching me the way I watch, patiently, for a very long time, and I only understood it when they put me in a room with no windows and felt it, at last, stop. And every hair on my body stood up because I knew that feeling. He had given it to me, and to Karen, and to the women in Missouri, and the panhandle, the sense of a hand on the back of the neck, the reluctance to stand too long in front of the dark glass. And now, at the very end, in a room with no windows, someone had given it back to him. Someone had spent years standing in his dark, the way he'd spent years standing in ours. I did not know yet who, but I knew, with the certainty of the stare that is not there, that the folder named K was not finished after all, and that the woman everyone said had run off to Arizona had never, for one single day, stopped watching the man who taught her the dark. Chapter 27. The tip that broke Karen's case wide came from a burner phone. It told the Panhandle detectives exactly where to look. It gave them the K folder's ending, gave Karen back her name, gave her sister a grave to stand at, instead of a lie about Arizona. It pinged one tower, once, and went dark. And when the tech laid that single ping beside the Dash's messages, the timing was a fit. and Ruiz sat across Rachel's table from me a second time and said, "Emma, I think the person who was talking to your husband in that thread is the same person who told us where to find his first wife. I think the Dash has been trying to stop him for years, from the inside, and I do not think you finding that phone was luck, or your doing, or his. I think somebody made sure a flashlight went missing from a pegboard, and she slid across the table one more thing, a photograph pulled from a storage unit rented under one of David's dead names, a unit full of the printed originals, the collection made solid. In among the pictures of the vanished women was one that did not belong, newer, placed there to be found, a photograph of David, taken from outside, through a window, from the dark of a yard, at night, unaware, catalogued, dated. The collector, collected, watched the exact way he watched, by someone who had stood patiently in his dark the whole time he thought he was the only one who ever stood in anyone's. On the back, in a woman's slanted hand that was not his small square print, 4 words. I never left him. Karen did not move to Arizona. I had known that since the garage floor. What none of us had imagined was the other shape the not Arizona could take, the shape that isn't a grave. She ran. 11 years ago, before there was an Emma, before there was a Chloe, David's first wife felt the pressure at the back of her neck the way I felt it, except she felt it sooner, or was braver sooner, or was simply first, with no one ahead of her to see it happen to. And instead of becoming a folder, she did the one thing a man like that cannot account for, because it requires giving up everything he is sure a person will never give up. She let him think he'd won. She staged the ending he wanted, close enough that he told her family the Arizona story and believed it himself, and she walked out of her own life the way I walked out of mine, except she never stopped walking. She became a ghost with a phone, and she used the one piece of him she'd kept, the knowledge of exactly how his mind moved, to find her way back into his dark, not as a wife, not as a victim, but as a flat little dash in a deleting thread, close enough to steer him, close enough to shorten it when she couldn't stop it, close enough, on one specific storm night, to make certain a flashlight went missing, so that a woman she had never met would go down into a garage and put her hand on the truth in time. She had been watching him for 11 years, the way he watched the rest of us for 1. She had out-collected the collector before I ever learned his name. They opened the other folders in the spring, and I made myself learn the names, all of them, because a folder is what he called them, and a name is the thing I could give back that he had spent so much care taking away. The woman in Missouri was named Denise. She liked to garden. There were 11 months of her among the tomatoes, unaware, before there were none. The woman in the panhandle was named Carol Ann, and she had a son, grown now, who had believed for 9 years that his mother had chosen a life that did not include him. I have met that man. I watched him receive the truth that she did not leave him, that she was taken, and I will tell you, it is a terrible thing to watch a person's whole grief turn over in one sentence and land a different way up. He thanked me. I did not deserve it. I took it anyway, because someone had to stand for Denise, and for Carol Ann the way I had learned to stand, and for a long time no one had. There was a storage unit rented under one of his dead names, and Ruiz told me one thing about it that I carry. It was climate-controlled. He paid extra every month, for years, to keep the photographs from yellowing. He kept them the way a museum keeps things. And I think that one detail says the whole of him, more than any word I have, that a man could stand in the dark outside 4 women's windows and feel nothing a jury would call feeling, and then drive across town and pay a premium to keep the pictures from aging, because the pictures were the part he loved. The pictures were the only place any of us ever lived for him, safe, warm, lit, and unaware, forever, the one way he could bear to have anyone at all. Karen's sister put a stone in the ground that summer with Karen's real name on it, even though there is no one under it, even though somewhere Karen is alive and walking and standing too long at black windows. She said she needed the name to exist somewhere, in stone, after 11 years of it existing only in a lie about Arizona. I stood beside her at that empty grave with its true name, and I understood that some stones are not for the dead. Some stones are just a name insisting, against a man who tried to erase it, that it was here, that it was real, that it looked back.
Chapter 28.
I testified in the fall, and I want to leave you with the one moment from that whole cold marble day that I keep. I had been afraid of the looking, of sitting in a raised box in a room full of strangers while my worst nights were read into a record. Ruiz told me a thing beforehand that held me up. You are not going up there to be seen, Emma. You are going up there to be the one who saw. Go be the witness. So I walked to the stand and sat down, and, for the first time since a coffee shop near a hospital 8 years before, I let myself look at David with nothing on my face for him to read. He looked wrong in that room, stripped of the kitchen and the workbench and the warm lit window, the whole set he'd built to stand the boyish face in. He looked like a coat on a chair. The jury couldn't see it. I could. I was the only person in that entire room who could actually see him, and this, at last, was the right side of the glass. And then he did the thing I will never forget. His lawyer was mid-sentence, and David, who in an hour of interrogation had never glanced at a one-way window 3 feet from his face, turned his head, slowly, and looked at the gallery, not at me, at the room behind me, and I watched the gauge-check eyes move across the back of that courtroom, face by face, reading, and the hair rose on my arms, because he was not afraid of the jury. He was not afraid of the verdict. A man who plans to the 19th is never surprised by an outcome he can see coming. He was scanning that gallery for the face of the woman who had been watching him longer than he had watched any of us, because a man like him does not fear a cage. A cage is just a room. What he cannot bear is to be the unaware one at the window, while someone in the dark outside looks in and owns the picture. I turned once, because I could not help it, and looked where he was looking, rows of strangers, reporters, and in the very back by the doors, a woman with dark hair I did not know, still and composed, watching the front of the room with an attention I recognized, because I had felt its cousin on the back of my own neck for a year. Our eyes did not meet. I told myself later I imagined her, the way you imagine a shape in a black window, but when the recess came and I looked again, the seat by the doors was empty, and no one remembered anyone leaving. They gave him consecutive life terms that winter, for Karen, for Denise in Missouri, for Carol Ann in the Panhandle, and for what he had been building, patient and unhurried, for me. He did not react when they read it. He was already somewhere else, standing outside some window only he could see, and I understood that the sentence was not the end of him, that a mind like that does not end, but that he would spend every one of those nights in a cell with no window, feeling that watched prickle crawl up his spine, never able to turn fast enough to catch her. There is a justice in that no jury could have written. It was arranged patiently, over 11 years, by a woman he thought he had sent to Arizona. Epilogue. I live somewhere else now. A small place, good locks, one story, so there are no stairs that aren't there. There is a window over the kitchen sink, the way every kitchen has one. And most nights I can stand at it and wash a pan, and look out at the dark, and feel nothing but the ordinary dark, the safe dark, the dark I have been slowly, stubbornly, one clean pan at a time, taking back. Chloe is older. She swims still. She has a flip turn now. She does not know all of it, and will not until she is ready, because some inheritances you can choose not to pass down, and I am trying to be the woman who breaks the line rather than the one who hands it on. I got my sister out the back door when I was 8. I got my daughter out the front door at 39. I have been getting the people I love out of dangerous houses my whole life. I only that one October night finally understood which house I was in. So I keep my own secrets now. I learned how from the best liar I ever met. I check the locks myself, and I never, ever stand too long in front of the glass, which is why I saw the envelope before it saw me. It was on the mat inside the door this past October, a year to the week from the storm, and it had come with no stamp and no postmark, which means a hand carried it to a door that is on no map and no calendar. Inside was one photograph. I made myself look at it the way Ruiz taught me, straight on. It was my new kitchen window, at night, lit, with a woman at the sink. Me, taken from the dark of my new backyard, from a tree line I check every single night. And I did not fall down, and I did not scream, because I turned it over. And on the back, in a woman's slanted hand, the hand from the storage unit, the hand I would know in any dark for the rest of my life, were 4 words, and they were not a threat. You are not alone. And under it, smaller, I check your trees past the fence too. K. I have not told Ruiz. I know I should, and I know what she'd have to do, and I have decided, the way I decided in August not to lift the tape yet, that there are truths you hold and truths you hand over, and that this one is mine. Because here is what I understand now that I did not understand at the sink, calling surveillance love. There is a watching that owns you, and a watching that keeps you, and from the inside, in the dark, they can look almost exactly alike, and the whole terrible education of my life has been learning, finally, to tell the two of them apart. Somewhere out there, a woman I have never met stands at the edge of my dark, checking the line of trees I cannot check while I sleep. She learned the dark from the same man I did. She has been standing in it for 12 years now, and she is not going to stop. And for the first time since a flashlight went missing from a pegboard, when I stand at my window and feel the creature in me wake at the back of my skull, I let myself believe it might be a friend. I check the locks myself. I never stand too long in front of the glass. But some nights, now, I lift one hand to the dark before I turn off the light, just in case she is out there. Just in case the watching, this once, is the kind that keeps you. Author's note. The second phone is a work of fiction. Emma, David, Karen, Chloe, Ruiz, every soul in these pages came out of the dark of my own imagination, and not out of any real person's life. But the fear at the center of it is not invented. Most of us have stood at a lit window over a dark yard and felt for no reason we could name that we should step back. This is a story about the woman who finally listened to that feeling, and about the terrible, ordinary truth that the most dangerous stranger you will ever meet may be someone you have loved for years, whose face you have never actually seen. If it kept you up, good. Check your locks. Trust the animal that pulls your sleeve. It has kept your kind alive for a very long time. Written, produced, and directed by Barron Darby. Narrated by Jessica Ann Bogart. For the books, by Barron Suspense Thriller Series. The End.